Hello. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Father Murr. Is that you? I haven't seen you for a long
It
time.
is me. It is me. Fear not, it is I. Yes, Robert. Happy Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah.
Father Murr, it's January 15th, Wednesday, the middle of January 2025. We haven't seen each other since before Christmas. How have
Ergo, the salutations for Christmas. Yes.
Wonderful. So, uh, we were chatting just for a moment. We think we've got internet connection now. And you said to me, life is a banquet, because I was complaining about how many difficulties there are.
Well,
Why don't we?
that comes from one of my favorite movies, Anti-Mame, with Rosalind Russell. I love Rosalind Russell as an actress before Mame. But the crazy thing was that when I was about, I think that movie came out in 60, 61, 62, something like that. I was about 11 or 12 years old. I had an Anti-Mame.
Oh,
I had an Anti-Mame, and her last name was Russell,
amazing.
just like Rosalind Russell. It was Mame Russell. And my Anti-Mame was about as eccentric as Rosalind Russell in that movie. As a matter of fact, she was the first one who took me on a plane to go to San Francisco, California. She was a piece of work. Anyway, yes, that line is from Anti-Mame, and it's a life is a banquet. And with her cynicism in the movie, she says, and most poor suckers are starving to death. That's the way she ended it. But life really is a banquet. It's a marvelous thing. It's a marvelous adventure. And I told you a little while ago too. Uh, there are a lot of different factors, I guess, that come together. But these last 3 years of my life in Andalusia have been absolutely the most enjoyable. You would think that it would be not that way because some people think I'm getting older, Robert.
Hmm.
But
Yes.
I'm telling you, these have been the most fantastic 3 years of my life. I mean that. Absolutely. Absolute fun, interesting people like yourselves who come over and visit. I've had visitors from all over the world. Very interesting people. And the background setting here of Seville is magnificent. So it's good. Life is good. It's enjoyable.
Okay. And I guess I
What can I
wanted.
tell you?
I think that's a beautiful way to begin the new year, and in part because so many people are weighed down with concerns and there's a lot of crisscrossing currents, and we're trying to address a few of them on this program. And yet, the overarching purpose of the program is this concept that there is hope, there is faith, there is
There's
love,
always hope. There's always
and,
hope.
and
Yep.
this idea that life is a banquet sort of is a scriptural vision as well as anti mame. That it
I can't believe we're equating Anti-Mame with sacred scripture, but there's something to it. Yes. Look,
I mean,
Robert, you know this. There are always going to be concerns, and I don't mean to sound like a like a Pollyanna, right? Kind of everything is wonderful and life is just ducky. It's not. There are a lot of problems in life. I have problems. You have problems. The world has problems. We address a lot of those problems on this program, and there are things to be concerned about. However, and I've told this to people all my life, and more so now. When you really believe that Christ is in charge of your life as a Christian, I don't know, things are much easier. They really are much easier. When we look at all of the problems as we do here often, we investigate some of the many problems and very serious problems that are happening within the church, the mystical body of Christ. I think when people get down, when they feel not happy, depressed with the reality that is the church today, and it is a mess. There's no question about it. But when they get down and out, it's because they really haven't understood that the head of the church is Jesus Christ. It's no one else. It's Jesus Christ himself. He's not going to let us down. He's not going to let the church down. You either believe that or you don't believe that. If you don't believe that, then you have every reason to be depressed.
mhm. All right.
But if you do believe it, you have every reason to be uplifted. Anyway, I do believe it.
Yeah, it's very easy to listen to one podcast after another, and this is a medium now that it's advancing really into the millions. Whether it's Mel Gibson talking with Joe Rogan, who's got almost 7 million views, or whether some of the very fine Catholic podcasters, but often as you listen, and I do listen to quite a few of them, you start to shake your head and say, "What a disaster! What
Mm.
how far we've wandered from the bells of St. Mary's."
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
The Bing Crosby film. Uh, Life is not just the Catholic Church is not just a Hollywood happy parish, and parish priests are out there every day. Bishops are out there.
And
Governments
you
are
know
out.
what, Robert? And you know this. There were a lot of unhappy people then too. There were. I've met some of them. And they just went. Everything wasn't just rosy, and there wasn't this great, wonderful period in the church where there were no problems. We didn't see the problems
Yeah,
because
you know.
because people didn't speak like people are speaking today. That's really the truth. They
Okay,
didn't speak openly about a lot of things, but there were a lot of people who were very hurt during the golden age, if you will. Um,
okay. Well, you know what
Everything
you're.
wasn't so rosy. That's
Well,
all I'm saying.
you're citing words that my father once spoke to me, probably 40 years ago, and I was speaking about the need to preserve tradition and well, how much had been lost in some of the exaggerations of the council and the years following the council. And a lot of people had stopped practicing and stopped going to church, and people were, in hula hoops at
Hmm.
mass. And my father said to me, "Bob, don't idealize too overly or turn into a kind of uh, an icon, the life of the old church." He said what you said. There were quite a few people who were
Sure.
unhappy, who were neurotic, who were too scrupulous. He said we had quite a bit of fear in the church, and he had
There
been a.
was a lot of that. Yes. Yeah.
And so now I'm reading a couple of comments here on the board. Palermo Trapani. I agree with Father Murr. Pope Francis' papacy has actually strengthened my faith because it reminds me that Christ is in charge of the church and he is 100% in control. So whatever is going on is by his permissive will to bring about some greater good.
Exactly. I really truly believe that. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's what I believe.
Well, thank you, Palermo. I think you've now said something as well and perhaps better than Father Murr. And
Well, that's easy. It's easy to be better. But
uh,
what Mr. Palermo said is that's exactly the truth. That's exactly the way you have to look at things. And any problems that are here today are here for a reason. They're here for a reason. Uh, they're here to be dealt with. They're here to be dealt with.
yeah,
Look, modernism. We've talked about modernism ad infinitum here. Modernism is a problem that's over 150 years old. It took 150 years for it to get to this point, at least 150 years for it to get to this point. It is now going to have to be addressed, really,
right.
truly addressed. All right. We had great popes who warned us about it. Pius the Tenth being one of them. Pius
Yeah,
the 12th also. The great popes warned us about it. Now we're seeing it happened. Now it has to be dealt with, and it will be dealt with.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
live in that hope.
And frankly, it probably will be another 150 years to deal with it. Uh,
Well, what do they say, Robert? You know that as best as I do. Best as I do, the church thinks in terms of centuries,
Precisely. Yes.
right?
Okay. So we did. I think we go right to the tragedy happening right now in the fires in Los Angeles. But in the midst of that tragedy, there was a moment which was so beautiful that we wanted
Mm.
to bring attention of our viewers to that moment. There is a family that in these terrific wildfires just north of Los Angeles, most of them, which also have taken down many of the most expensive houses. We're talking not just 1 million, but 10, 15, $20 million homes, but
Yeah.
dozens and dozens of them. And this is in Palisades and it's in Malibu. And it's been reported now that Mel Gibson himself lost his home more or less at the same time he was on the Joe Rogan program a few days ago. And these winds are whipping the fire along. 50, 60-mile-an-hour winds will pick up a spark, send it across the street, send it a half a mile away. But this family lost their home, and then they reacted to their loss with faith. We have a producer, Katie. Could you possibly bring that image up of that family? This is a program in California.
As the fires ravaged homes in California, one family decided to turn to Our Lady when they found out their house was destroyed.
Regina Caeli, laetare, alleluia, laetare, alleluia.
Yes, that's beautiful voices right there. Peter and Jackie Halpin, alongside their 6 adult children, found.
All right. Father Murr, this is a moment for you to respond.
Well, let me just say this. When I saw that clip a few days ago, I was watching it truly thinking that the camera was all of a sudden going to zoom in on their home that had miraculously been spared. And I thought the title of the story was going to be "People of Faith Through Prayer and Devotion, Their House Was Spared as a sort of miracle in these terrible fires." Then I saw the continuation of the story. It ended saying their house had been completely destroyed, left in ashes. Everything that they owned went up in ashes. And they're out singing the Regina Caeli. Then I realized what the real miracle was. The real miracle wasn't the house that was saved, because it wasn't. The real miracle was that this whole family, with all these adult children, accepted the will of God. They simply accepted the will of God and went on and found that day was no better or worse than any other day to praise God and thank God
Yes.
for all that He has given it. That was a miracle. And I'm going to tell you something, just as an aside, Robert. The Von Trapp family has nothing over these singers. These are great. These are great. This is a whole family. They're husband and wife and 6 children. Beautiful. I was really impressed with that, because this is the miracle that each one of us can live, accepting the will of God. And it's no small thing. It's no small feat to accept the will of God many times in life, as this time in life. What a colossal thing to have lost everything that you own, not just the house, the building, everything that you own, photographs, paintings, heirlooms, everything that you've had for 40 years of marriage or 50 years of marriage or whatever it was, all of the memories, everything gone. But you rely on you're going to follow the will of God. That's what a miracle that is. And it's a beautiful miracle. It speaks much louder than a house untouched by flames. I mean that.
Yeah. I mean, there's 3 or 4 things that come to my mind. You're speaking of the will of God, and often it's hard to know exactly how to respond to something that happens, because it could also be the will of man, and you have to resist certain things, you have to choose. In a natural situation like this with a wildfire, you do accept it. Throughout your life, you have to accept whatever does happen, because it's the fact. Otherwise, you live in unreality. How
Right.
do you transfer that, though, to a true sense of gratitude? and somehow embrace thy will be done.
Well, don't you, look, I think most of us have had tragedy, have experienced tragedy in life. What do you do to snap yourself out of that? A lot of people never snap out of that. A lot of people have had a tragedy, and the tragedy was double because the tragedy took them down with it.
There you go. Yeah.
It took the survivors down with it. That's terrible. But what you can do, and it takes a little time in some cases. Everything kind of takes time, but time is also a friend, not an enemy. But
Yeah.
you come to look at different aspects of it, and you see it wasn't all bad. Even the tragedy. What did the tragedy do? Did it wake me up? Did it connect me with other people? Was it this man's time or this woman's time to go to God in a might have been an accident or something else? Did it wake me up to the possibility of the fragility of life, that I have to be prepared myself to meet my maker at any given time? All of these different things. What did it do? What did it do? How did I handle it? What did I see in it? Because there's a point of salvation in everything. There just is. There just is. And it's, we've mentioned Viktor Frankl a few times anyway on the program, and I know you've read Frankl. So have I.
Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes, especially Man's Search for Meaning. Brilliant book. Brilliant book. When you can be in a concentration camp and find meaning in life, anybody can find it. Anybody can find it, and especially, Robert, anybody who has Christ. Viktor Frankl is a Jew who does not have the Christian perspective. He found meaning in life. How much easier would it be for a Christian? How much easier, seriously?
Yeah. So you're saying that if a tragedy occurs in great pain, great sorrow, and we know that this occurred also for Our Lady when Jesus suffered and was bleeding and died, her heart was pierced. But if a tragedy occurs, say your house is taken, all your precious items, you're saying there's a possibility of worsening that if you're destroyed as well by it, and if you rail against God because of it.
Yes. And yet I would say not a possibility, Robert, a fact. If you've decided to give up, you're going down with the tragedy. And you may never get up from it. That's the problem.
So I guess that's the message here. When you face a tragedy, when you're in great pain, if you can't find a way to somehow get back into the faith and get back into the belief in the final goodness of God, you're going to double the tragedy. That your reaction is actually a tremendous moment of decision in your spiritual life.
Yesterday, I was with a group of cloistered sisters, St. Claretians, right? And I was just talking to them. What great women of prayer and of faith, unbelievable, in the cloisters, praying for everybody constantly. How much we owe them, how much we owe the cloistered nuns and monks who live lives of penance for our benefit, our spiritual benefit. But one of the things too that we were talking about in the in that, just a minute, I just lost the idea.
With the contemplative nuns, and then the reaction to tragedy.
Yes, but there was. It'll come back to me. It'll come back. This happens, Robert. This is my year to turn 75, and it's happening more frequently than that.
So yeah. It's a jubilee.
Yeah, it's a jubilee, I guess. But it'll come back. It was impressive. Oh yes, I know what it was. We were talking about Saint Teresa of Avila. And Truman Capote. This sounds like I'm going all over the place, mostly because I am. Truman Capote was on the Tonight Show years ago, and he was writing a book that he never finished. He only finished one book in cold blood. which became a bestseller and great movie and everything else. But he was working on a book forever, and he had the title of it. And Johnny Carson asked him, well, what is the title? And he said, the title is Unanswered Prayers. And Johnny Carson said, Unanswered Prayers, that's kind of a curious title for a novel. I think it was going to be a mystery or crime novel or something like that, but Unanswered Prayers. And Truman Capote, in his own inimitable fashion and voice, said, well, it comes from St. Teresa of Avila, the quote, Unanswered Prayers. And it refers to a larger quote. And here's the quote. St. Teresa said, of course, in Spanish, but it translates this way. More tears have been shed for answered prayers than for unanswered prayers. In other words, when you don't get the response you're asking for, that is the response. That is the response. The response is you're not going to get it because there's something wrong with it, or it wouldn't bring you the happiness, or it's not the will of God. You accept that.
Well,
and sometimes when you get what you're praying for, remember how when people say, be careful what you wish for?
yeah.
Well, be very careful what you're praying for, because sometimes when you get it, it's not good for you, what you're wishing for, right? So again, the quote is, more tears have been shed for answered prayers as for unanswered prayers.
Okay, well,
That's what we were talking about yesterday.
You've just taken us to a new height of understanding of the difficulty and peculiarity of the human condition, where we long for something, but we don't realize that if we get it, we will be harmed or we will be tearful afterwards. But we say, please give this to me, God, allow me to have this. And suddenly we can come to understand that that very initial point of our desire, of what we want, is where our selfishness creeps in, and that we have to be transformed from that very initial point. And therefore,
this Robert, like just with what you're saying right now, another kind of example comes to mind. We were just talking about this too the other day. There was a study done of all of the people who have won the lottery, right? Have you ever seen that?
I believe,
and their tragic ends.
Terrible results.
This one commits suicide. That one falls off a bridge. This one, the money has destroyed everything, but they couldn't have been happier for 5 seconds in their life. Now they've got everything. Well, okay. Well, it wasn't everything.
Father Murr, when we were young, we were told by the old priests, don't play the lottery. Do you remember that?
That's right. I remember one priest who told me in Mexico they always had the national lottery there. He called it. Well, I'm going to use the word. It's not so harsh, but he said pendejos. It's like an idiot. He said it's the idiot tax. It's the idiot tax.
Well,
right?
the studies have shown that it's the most regressive tax of all. Almost never does a wealthy person spend their entire week's pay or month's pay on a lottery ticket. But the people who hope that they can somehow get out of their rut of drudgery and tiredness and scrimping, they go and they spend their whole paycheck and they lose it all. And that funds the government.
Because that's because the rich man or the rich woman who have made a fortune actually worked for it. And they know how to save and they know how to invest and everything else. But the person who has not worked for it and just gets it is in for a big surprise because they don't know how to handle it.
Okay, well, I think we've talked here about essential matters of God's will, our reaction to tragedy, our acceptance, even our gratitude when we are chastened. He chastens whom he loves, we say, don't we?
There were times in life that I wish he didn't love me so much, but yes.
Well, that's another joke almost of Saint Teresa of Avila. Didn't she once say to God, if this is how you treat your friends, I wonder, I'd hate to be your enemy.
It was a beautiful moment. It was a beautiful moment. During a rainstorm, she stepped out of a carriage. She was going to reform one of the convents in Spain. And she stepped out of a carriage and fell face first into the mud. And that's when she pronounced that. Full of mud, she said, "Dear Lord, if this is the way you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few of them." Anyway, that was it.
So few. Now, that singing that we saw, they were singing Regina Caeli, Queen of Heaven. It was parents and then a bunch of children, including adult children. And that was perhaps the most striking thing to me. That family had stayed together. And actually,
Yes.
I had that thought, and then an old friend of mine posted it here. He's watching, Jim Burton, who's an expert on all the scientific studies of the Shroud of Turin. And Jim
Oh,
says,
I've seen him. I've seen him on different reports and YouTube things. Excellent, excellent. Yes.
great to have you with us, Jim. And and also, I should say in passing, it's wonderful to have any viewers and people who enjoy us. That's really actually humbling. And but we would appreciate if you hit the like button and tell other people about the program, and we could grow the program. And Jim says, and the fact that the entire family has kept the faith is an inspiration. And he asked this question: how many of us know families whose children have left the faith? So, Father,
Jim, I would ask this question more directly. I think how many of us know families where no one has left the faith? Very few.
yeah,
Very few. Very few, because it's a tragedy today. That family, without knowing them, I can tell you, have their values right. They have their values right. First of all, they have mother and father who have stayed together, and they pray together. There's that family. I know from a dear friend of theirs, have great devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
oh, do you know that family? Do you actually know?
I do not know the family. I know I'm a very good friend of a very good friend of theirs. They
Oh,
live
really?
right near Pasadena. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're devout people, but they always have been. And they raise their children that same way. But their devotion to the Sacred Heart is beautiful and almost unique.
All right. And then we have John B., who gives us often very challenging remarks, who has a related comment. John B., my theory from the LA fires, as most people survived, God could be warning faithful Catholics to leave LA because the big earthquake is coming. Get out. Father.
In other words, we leave Los Angeles to the Protestants, the Jews, and the Muslims and the atheists. All faithful Catholics out. I don't know. I'd have to think about that for a while.
Okay, I'm glad you're a little hesitant. Yeah, John, I think that, it's an interesting thought, but I think Father's reaction shows that there could be troubling consequences. However, it's always been the case that people have been predicting a big earthquake in LA, and it's just hard
Well,
to know
that's true. That's true. And it'll arrive one day. It will.
Yeah, and so we had these events, and it's been wonderful to talk about them. I think we've gotten a better understanding of how to react to suffering and tragedy. We appreciate the family singing. They've given an example to the whole world. And the fact that you even know through a friend, the family, shows how close we all are today with the internet and these communications. It's world spanning. So it's the 15th of January. And on the one hand, we've got big changes occurring in the United States, although people could even, if the deep state remains through different presidencies, maybe the changes won't be so profound. Maybe this is just one more change in leadership. And we'll be watching in these coming days as the various leaders of offices in Washington are chosen or rejected by the Senate. And Donald Trump, elected president in November for the second time, first time in 2016. He's coming back on January 20th in 5 days. He's been speaking in various venues about some of the plans he has. And one thing he said is that he's interested in taking Greenland into the United States orbit, perhaps even officially making it a protectorate or even a part of the United States. And he's even mentioned taking back the Panama Canal, closer relations or some type of a special relationship with Canada. And people have been listening to these things and wondering how all this presidency will turn out and what it will mean also for the tragic situation of nearly 1 million people, soldiers being killed in Ukraine, and the tragic situation in the Middle East with what's an estimated now 46,000 mostly civilians killed in Gaza in the Middle East, and the whole Middle East in turmoil with the takeover of Syria. And I just thought, Father Murr, you would be the perfect person to give a thoughtful, how are we to be prepared to judge these events of the coming days of the new president?
Well, go with the flow. First of all, I think again, I may be wrong. These are my observations, which are limited. But I very much take Trump. I like Trump. I like him very much. I'm not ashamed at all. I'm very proud to say I voted for him. But it's because these things that he says, he speaks in hyperbole an awful lot. We're going to do this. We're going to do that.
You're almost speaking in terms of biblical criticism. If you're trying to interpret Trump's sayings, you need to look at the language he's using and interpret the situation. So he speaks in hyperbole. This is his manner of speaking, and we have to take.
It is almost a question of exegesis.
Exegesis.
Yeah, you have to listen. I don't know. He says a lot of things, and I think he says an awful lot of things with humor. But I think it's a humor that he has so many enemies, and so many on the left. Most people on the left that I know don't have a real sense of humor.
Oh, God.
No, I'm telling you, they just don't. They laugh when people fall down on a banana peel and break their arm or something. That's funny. I had a sister like that. That was funny, but anything else wasn't funny. But I think a lot of things he says in humor. It's not serious. And then also he's got another side to him that you have to always keep in mind. He is a negotiator.
Mm-hmm.
He's the wheeler dealer. Now, what you always want to do when you're negotiating, I learned from an uncle of mine, Babe Letourneau, is you want to get points of attention over here and over there rather than the sales or the purchase. Get a little distraction while you're over here with the main thing. Trump is a master of that. He knows what he's doing, and a lot of the things that he says are really for distraction, minor distraction. I think give him time and see what he does. I'm telling you that the cast that he's putting together for the departments for his cabinet and all I'm very impressed with the category of people that he's chosen. It reminded me a little bit. You're too young for this, but I'm not. I remember the Kennedy days when Kennedy just took office in 1960, and all of these young people were there. All of a sudden, the White House was, well, I was going to say it was Camelot. That's kind of pie in the sky thing, but it was filled with young people. It had new blood. There was new life in it, and I think there's something parallel to that is happening with the Trump administration. He's getting in people who are not. They're just not the people who have all of the right recommendations and the right CVs and the right everything else. He's looking beyond that. He's looking for people who have experience and people of faith. And when I say faith, I don't mean just Christian faith. Also, he's looking for that, but people who have faith in their country also, faith in people. He's looking for those kind of values, and I think he's getting them. There's a lot of promise. We'll see how it develops. He'll certainly make some mistakes. There's no question of that. Everybody does. Anybody who's human does. And those who are not human, as our Lord, we tend to crucify them because we don't like their perfection, right? This is the way we are. But I have a lot of faith and hope and that he's going to do what needs to be done. He understands what the problem is. The problem, it's like Ronald Reagan said. Again, this is my political philosophy. I like Reagan when he said, we don't need more government. Government is the problem. I really believe that. I really believe that he hit something, he hit a chord there. And I think that's what he's going to look at reforming. I really do. And, give the man a chance. Give the man a chance. If it doesn't work out, it couldn't be, excuse me for saying this, but it could not possibly be worse than the last 4 years. It couldn't.
Well, let's look at the choice with regard to the Catholic Church and to the institutional center of the church in Vatican City, the Holy See in Rome. He's nominated Brian Birch, who is the founder and editor of Catholic Vote, a very active Catholic in America, and very supportive of Trump in the past campaign. To show his appreciation, he's named. Of course, Brian still has to go through the nomination process, has to be voted on in the next few days, but he will become Trump's man in the Vatican. I was wondering, do I have a list here of the ambassadors to the Vatican over the years? Maybe I do. Let me see. And then I would wonder what you think about slides, and I don't think I have my share screen. How do I share my screen?
Well, we can only judge on outward appearances at this time, right? Because we don't know that much about Mr. Birch or how he's going to be operating or what he's going to be saying. I remember Raymond Flynn. I remember Raymond Flynn very well.
Okay.
And Shakespeare, I remember.
Yeah, I just thought that just for a kind of stroll down memory lane, since I knew Shakespeare as well, and I even saw William Wilson. So I have seen every one of these men. William Wilson came in the mid-'80s, the very beginning of my time in Rome. Frank Shakespeare, I knew well. He became kind of a mentor to me. I did interviews with him and later traveled with him to Russia. He was working for Ronald Reagan, and together with Ronald Reagan and as ambassador of the United States, worked with John Paul II, particularly on the negotiations with Gorbachev as the Soviet Union was declining, as it was collapsing, as financially could not face all the challenges it had in Eastern Europe and Star Wars. And he was there 86 to 89. Thomas Patrick Milady carried that process through. His wife was a wonderful president of the American University in Rome. And Tom Milady wrote a book about his experience, and he just recently passed away. Wonderful, thoughtful man, a real honor, a real distinct honor for our country to have had him in that post. Ray Flynn I met first when I was visiting him, and they let me into the residence of the ambassador, and I heard a basketball bouncing. And I said, where should I go? And they said, oh, go outside there. He's at the basketball court. And so I went out, and he nodded to me. He says, hold on just a second. And he shot about 10 more shots from about 15 or 20 feet, top of the key and around. And they all were swished through the net. And he was sweating because he had actually been a Boston Celtic in the NBA as a member of that team just for a year, I think, when he was a young man. So he liked to play basketball. He had been the mayor of Boston. Lindy Boggs, who came from Louisiana and was a very distinguished, noble lady who was in the late 90s. and that was the last part of the Clinton administration. And then James Nicholson, who was up through the U.S. Army, had a wonderful wife, and they had been poor really as young people. And he described going across the country in his station wagon with his wife and a couple of young kids, and they had nothing. And he later became the head of the Republican Party in the United States, and he became ambassador to the Vatican 2001 to 2005, and that was the time just after 9/11, and into those were the Bush years, at the time of the Gulf War. I was a little bit critical of the Gulf War, and I wrote in the magazine it was a useless slaughter. Thousands and thousands of Iraqis were bulldozed under the sand. Mm-hmm. But James Nicholson was a man of great goodness and character, and we actually had a conference that I collaborated with the ambassador at the Gregorian University on the whole problem of trafficking. Of course, the problem continues to this day. And then somehow I can't scroll down on this screen, but there's been a number of other ambassadors, and now we're going to have the proposal to have, we had Callista Gingrich, and now we're going to have Brian Birch. So what does all this signify to you, Father, about the relation between the United States and the Vatican, how important it is?
Sure, it's important because you have the strongest nation on earth, the most influential, is the United States, and that's no empty boast. We have to keep in mind that before us was England, before England was Spain, before Spain was France, the Romans, the Greeks. Everybody's had his time with the football, so to speak. And when the United States is finished, our time is finished, it'll go to someone else. But right now, the United States of America is certainly the most influential nation on earth, for good and for bad. For good and for bad. A lot of the ideas that we export are not so good. They really are not. And as President Trump also remarked, a lot of the things that the CIA and FBI have been involved in, and the CIA around the world, have not always been so great. Okay,
no.
So it's good. It's good and bad. However, we're dealing also with what we believe. What we believe is the one true church. So when you have the combination of the two of those, the liaisons being the nuncio and the ambassadors in from the United States to the Vatican, it's an important role. This man who's being sent as ambassador, or President Trump is proposing, is a devout Catholic, a friend of the Latin Mass.
Yeah.
He has 9 children.
Yeah.
As the old Irish pastors say, and a fine upstanding Catholic family it is, and a beautiful wife, and they seem to be happy people, and of course, obviously practicing Catholics. I don't think I've spoken to a number of priests, also calling from Rome. It doesn't seem that the Holy Father is overjoyed with the selection. Let me just put it that way.
Wow.
Which is very likely the reason that Trump named him.
Okay.
Because I believe that between the two of them, there's a little bit of a conflict that needs resolving, right?
Yeah.
And also there's something too that people should keep in mind. The people who are in the diplomatic corps, who are sent as nuncios, are not to be made cardinals. It's a stipulation. They are not to be made cardinals. They have to understand that when they become nuncio of any place, that's the end of the line. They have reached the end of the line. There is no higher up, except in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The Pope decided to make a cardinal as the nuncio, which we've never had. So I think there's a little bit of a power struggle going on that nobody realizes. I think the Holy Father wants to influence, in as much as it's possible, some things about the United States, some things about the church in the United States. And I think President Trump also wants to influence the way the Vatican sees the United States and sees the church in the United States. So therefore, we have the new ambassador from the Vatican proposed, who's a very devout Catholic, practicing one, and a very intelligent and capable man. We also have a new archbishop sent to Washington, D.C. McElroy from San Diego. San Diego, a place, people from San Diego, please do not misunderstand me. But I'm going to say it. San Diego is not a place that would merit a cardinal. And I say that I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota, right? St. Paul is a place that does not merit a cardinal. It's because of our size and our importance. It's a periphery. It's a periphery. That's exactly. It's also a place that is not in charge of other dioceses. Right? Like Los Angeles oversees other dioceses, tribunals and things like that. But anyway, it seems that the Holy Father made this man cardinal thinking of something else. And I think we saw what the reason was. He took him from San Diego, which probably will not receive another cardinal in his stead. And he moved him into Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And I think the reason for that is that you have a man who's very progressive, liberal, some ideas that I wouldn't share many of his ideas. Neither would you. I think a lot of people would not. However, that's the man that the Vatican wants there as a point of friction. And it doesn't necessarily have to be negative friction. Friction isn't always negative. Friction can be good. It can cause growth and understanding. So we're going to see what happens there. So you've got the Vatican moving its men, and you've got the United States moving its men. It's going to be an interesting couple of years, but you're going to see, I think, a more American opinion being given to the Vatican on many matters, and also the Vatican to the United States on many matters politically. Interesting times and interesting people.
All right. Was Nancy Pelosi the U.S. ambassador to the Vatican under Biden?
No, that's impossible.
No, she was not.
No, she was not.
I'm sorry.
But, please. I mean, my goodness, it's bad. It's bad enough. The reality is bad enough.
No. That's just somehow an illusion, or it was never the case. She was always.
I think she may have thought she was. I'm sure
she visited Rome
a lot of things. Yeah, she visited Rome, and people should remember that after Archbishop Corleone of San Francisco prohibited her from receiving Holy Communion, she went to the Vatican within a few days, attended the Pope's Mass, and received communion from the Pope. This is kind of the back and forth that we're in right now. Not a good place. Not a good place.
Okay, we have one viewer. If the relationship between U.S. and Vatican matters, then surely the appointment of the head of the Archdiocese of D.C. matters. And this is precisely, you've just been explaining this already. Yeah, so Robert McElroy from San Diego, just a few days ago, was named as the successor to the retiring Cardinal George of,
Gregory.
Cardinal George was in Chicago. Actually, he was a good friend. And
an understandable mistake, Robert. An understandable mistake. George and Gregory. Why not?
They're very different men. But Gregory was retiring, and no one knew who was going to come to Washington. And McElroy was chosen. Father Murr has just described all the possible interpretations of this. He's a figure. He's an intelligent man, and yet somehow always seems to choose the more progressive position. his position would be, as I think all of these men, would be far more Catholic in the small c sense, universal, if they would present all the arguments as Thomas Aquinas encouraged us always to do. Even if you don't agree with the arguments, present the arguments for those teachings in tradition, for those liturgical traditions regarding the old mass, and then show in some way, therefore, a certain respect. This is part of the cause of our divisions right now. Everyone debating doesn't really try to get into the mind of the other person and understand what it is that motivates them to be so favorable. And the traditionalists, of course, are favorable to staying in contact with Jesus Christ, with what he handed down, the deposit of the faith, and what the early apostles handed down all through the centuries. And for us to suddenly say in the 21st century, we've got a new understanding, is the height of arrogance and superficiality. Okay, we're going to have to wrap up the show, but I think we've touched really how to react to tragedy, the family who sang when their house was burnt in LA, what to do about anything in your life that seems to be an answer, not an answer to your prayer, and how to try to look at that. Then the very fact that in January of 2025, we are having political changes, natural disasters. We're going to have all sorts of economic issues. There's global hot spots. All the more reason to keep to the faith, to keep up a certain life of prayer. And so I'd like you to kind of summarize all this, and then we'll say goodbye, Father Murr.
Well, I couldn't do a better summary than you just did. I would like to say one final thing that we didn't get around to discussing. We're running out of time. The Holy Father wrote, and if you will, an autobiography called Hope. And in that, he said some disparaging things about traditional Catholics, traditional-minded Catholics, and especially those of us who love and offer the Tridentine Mass. He called young priests, young Catholic priests who are traditionally minded, that is to say, who are Catholic, mentally unbalanced. Now, I've just got to say one thing, and with this I'll end. A loving father of a family doesn't humiliate his children that way in public. You can disagree with your children, you can reprimand them, have a good talk with them, even punish them. But you do that in private. You don't do it in public. To say such things, publish it in a book, I have to say, I find very offensive. And a lot of people all over the world find very offensive, especially those young Catholic priests who are more and more and more. They're not becoming less and less and less. I think they're a sector of the church to be contended with. We'll see. But I was very disappointed in those those words of the Pope toward that group of Catholic priests. I thought that it was out of place.
All right. So we have a family, the family of the church. We have our own families. We pray for the families of everyone among you, our viewers. And families pass through many difficulties. The fact that you point out the role of the father and the role of the father to keep the family together and try to encourage his children. And if they are doing something that he feels is wrong, he somehow tries to bring them around. But it just means that this family of the church, we still have to love it and try as best we can, whether it's by writing or a podcast or celebrating the liturgy or going on pilgrimage or just going through our daily tasks. We still have to love the family and somehow try to keep it together.
Yes, couldn't agree more.
All
Robert,
right. Happy New Year.
what do you think? Should we wrap up? God
it up.
bless. See you next week. Same time, same station.
Yes. We'll go through this year together, I hope.
Good. Thank you very much, Robert. God bless everybody, especially our viewers. And thank you for keeping us in your prayers also. Thank you.
Thanks.
Join us on pilgrimage in 2024. This August, we are in Spain and France, Garabandal to Lourdes. September, we head to Mexico, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and we learn about the Flower World Prophecy. October, we return to Andalusia, Spain with Father Murr for a retreat and pilgrimage, and we end the year in Italy, Christmas in Rome for the beginning of the Jubilee year. We have a few seats left on each pilgrimage. Be sure to sign up